the colonial time and culture, you know, of France in my country, Senegal. And so this is like basically my first major, you know, solo show for a while. And I wanted to like revisit, you know, that kind of sort of like context of colonialism. And especially now, you know, since I left Portland and I moved to Chicago, I've done quite a bit of work, you know, researching, you know, the colonial architecture from Senegal. And because, you know, this whole time that I kind of like stopped making art in Portland, you know, which was 3 to 4 years, you know, I was very much into sort of like going back to my roots, going back to what I know the most, and trying to introspect that and create a new avenue in which I can see a new aesthetic that, you know, would work with how I feel now. So so I did a residency in New Orleans because it was the closest to the architecture, you know, I was seeking in Senegal, because the French Quarter in New Orleans was kind of built as some kind of like, you know, follow-up, you know, from that architecture was created in Senegal in the, you know, 17th century, you know, so, and in Saint Louis, where I was born. So I revisited that architecture and kind of played with, you know, in using photography, and then turn that photography into, you know, sort of like supports to paint on, you know. So there you have first a dialogue between the medium photography and painting, and, you know, how they respond to contemporary context, and how do they also participate in contemporary making, you know, as media that sit next to each other, but also, you know, to just like sort of kind of like go back to the history of photography in Africa, which was very anthropological. You know, we were photographs, and how do I sort of recontextualize being the subject to being also, you know, an author, you know, within that parameter. You know, how do I change the discourse from being now the one who are taking these photographs, you know? So, and then also playing within that history of photography, I had also to go back to the history of painting, knowing that, you know, most of the painters we know from art history were white and were white male. So to me, as a Black man, you know, there was little reference about, you know, my contribution to painting. I can say, I don't want to say it didn't exist, but it wasn't included. You know, Western canon didn't include, you know, Black painters. So going from there, you know, I was able to kind of like recontextualize and reimagine or recreate an imaginary city, you know, an imaginary city, which is the post-colonial landscape I'm showing at this ledge. So it's a body of 10 pieces, you know, 2 are like photography based, and 8 are on canvas, and 4 or 5 drawings, you know. So, you know, and just going back to kind of like that urban vibe, that sort of Blackness, you know, that I wanted to express within abstraction, you know. And you can see on the paintings, you can always find, you know, little spaces where you get a photograph, or even a hole when, you know, the painting on canvas, those holes kind of dictate the absence of Blackness within the history of painting. And also they jump from there to sort of like bring more of a sort of like what to say, an urban Black aesthetic, thinking about graffiti, thinking about street art, and thinking about also you know, how all of that were sort of kind of like in the mid 80s, 90s, you know, early 21st century, to transpose, you know, on the canvas through the work of Basquiat, the work of Romare Burden, the work of, you know, Raymond Sanders, and so on. So maybe you can show me one of the paintings, and I can maybe just talk about one painting to sort of give you the context. This is a drawing, and it's like composed of 2 different tiny little bit windows of architecture from my native city, Saint Louis, and also sort of like being kind of like reinterpreted or being repositioned or reappropriated in the context of sort of, you know, the grid, you know, the geometry around urban landscape, and also, you know, what I would see as like compartmentalization of a wall. Is it possible to see a painting? Cool. So this is a typical example. Thank you. This is a typical example of, you know, this piece is 3.5 foot, almost 4 foot by 5 foot long. So it's a big panel, you know, and it's a facade of a, you know, hotel particulier, you know, from a lady who used to live in Paris in the, you know, late 18th century. So she would come to New Orleans and, you know, have her vacation there and, you know, stay at this house. So to me, like, sort of like it's not like when I paint like this on the photograph, I'm not taking a revenge on photography. I'm not taking a revenge on architecture. It's not aggressive, but it's more about sort of like finding my voice and finding my way into this architecture that I don't own as people, but that was everywhere from where I was, basically. It was transplanted there, it was sitting there, and we had to live with it, but we didn't create it. And so it becomes this sort of foreign body that was kind of a sacred land, which we couldn't touch, but also which sort of kind of traumatized us and invaded us. So me sort of kind of like, you know, playing with this facade and going back and forth and adding paint to it is a way of sort of kind of like, you know, invoking and bringing back, you know, my voice, because there is always an absence within my identity, which is European, that I don't claim because it was forced on me. But, you know, that sometimes I have to kind of like, you know, inspect and admit. So the painting on photograph speaks a lot about that. Yeah, this is another piece. Maybe we can just like go to one that is on canvas. Yeah, like, yeah, for example, this one, this is a, you know, one of the typical, you know, sort of aesthetic I'm working on right now. You know, it's, I think it's 8 foot by 4, and it's on canvas, and which is an imaginary wall, an imaginary facade of a building that sort of kind of like combine, you know, this history of domesticity and European domesticity in Africa, but also, you know, borrow a lot of the African street aesthetic, you know. So if you see like up front, you have like those sort of tile, you know, the orange and the white, which usually you would find inside, but I brought it outside on the sidewalk and then recreate this kind of like black door, you know, the 4 windows and the big, you know, green, orange wall and the sky above it, to just kind of like speak of that sort of, again, that street landscape, post-colonial kind of feel that it's in my head. Questions?
You want to move on to questions, Modou?
Yeah.
Edson, do you want to start with some of the ones that you have?
I saw that somebody asked if the photographs are found photograph. Actually, I took them. You know, I did a residency in New Orleans and Saint Louis, Senegal, and I did a 2-week residency in both places, and I pretty much like kind of like made 500 photographs, and they were actually film photographs made from disposable cameras. So they were very random snapshots, you know, that I took to kind of like sort of like insert myself within the everyday life, within, you know, the building kind of like situation, you know, kind of like get close to them, like the proximity that I was creating, like, you know, just kind of like taking snapshot. to me, that was kind of like guiding me to create that sort of platform that I wanted. So they are not random. They are, I mean, they are not found. They, you know, they are my photographs.
Emily is asking, could you talk about the cutouts within the paintings?
Yes, you know, like, you know, yeah. As a painter, you know, I came to it, you know, within a, you know, like we all know when you go to art school, you get, you know, bombarded by these sort of Western, you know, canons, you know, everybody talk about, you know, Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns and, you know, Lichtenstein and, you know, all of those guys, you know, or a few French painters, but, you know, not often you hear like Black painters, you know, so there is an absence of the history of Black painter within art history. So for me to state that before I even start working on the canvas, I had to violate the canvas. I have to like rip it open, you know, to sort of say, okay, I'm not there, so I'm gonna make a hole to state it, and then I come in and I paint. So.
Can you talk a little bit more about your use of your social media in relation to your making?
Yeah, well, one thing I missed actually, which was very enhanced, you know, by the COVID-19 confinement was like when I was in Portland, I had too much of it, you know, but still I had some of it, which was to be confronted to my practice, my studio practice within my student, my friends, you know, having a space, a community where you can sort of kind of create that dialogue all the time, you know. But now that I kind of came back to a solitary practice in my studio, I felt the need to like share it and see how people would react to my work. You know, just by seeing like a snippet of like 5 to 3 minutes of me making work, and also it comes within the territory of performance. You know, because being an artist is pretty much a performative act. You know, but we often do it in private, you know, so and knowing now, you know, the rise of all of these sort of kind of like performative acts within the art context, and also being confined, sort of made it easy for me to kind of bring that performance into the making in my studio.
Kind of how you're painting live, can you also talk a little bit about your use of color and kind of your relationship with it?
Yeah, my colors are basics, but the only difference, like the only thing I'm adding to it is, I would say, the dust of Africa, you know, because in Africa, you know, like, whether it's like dawn or dusk or midday, because of the dust, you know, the Sahara Desert, you know, the sand, it's blasting all the time. So you see everything through the filter of that. So a red become like kind of ochre orange, or gets darker, you know, gets a little bit dirtier, it becomes sandier, you know. So within those kind of like, lens I have, looking at colors in the environment, using that sort of, yes, basically that's what it is, yeah. So I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, you are.
Good. But another thing also about the color is that, as a painter, I have the easy colors and the difficult colors, you know, and, my difficult colors are orange, pink, green, you know, and yellow. But the yellow is always there to support me, to, to kind of like give me space, you know, and the green is when really, I'm making a strong statement about the light and the tone, you know, of the painting. So those are the difficult colors that come in, and within that, I always try to sort of ease it up with white, black, or blue.
Could you talk more about the post-colonial landscape and the colonization of the body?
Yeah, like I said, we've been perceived through somebody else, view, like the anthropological sort of lens, and so it's my body, but it's not, because I'm always perceived through the eyes of somebody else, and who has a very sort of clear, idea of who I am that I even don't know, so within that, I'm always sort of trying to find my path, but also I wanted to do it with a sense of domesticity, a sense of familiarity, and a sense of comfort. That's why, I use architecture, and that's why I use landscape and spaces, and we know that so many artists now, are versed into, working with the Black body for the same reason, but also to kind of conjure, and call into a no perspective their own body. But I'm doing it within my environment, so the material I use are always like kind of close to like looking like curtains. The canvas is tuned like up into a blanket, and I add other objects that you can find, in the familiarity of a Black life or African life, let's say.
Can you talk a little bit more about collaboration and how collaboration is changing today?
Yes, like for example, the best collaboration I had so far was to actually create a show and have 3 months to do it, and have a company partner in Senegal. I'm talking about the show, the current show, You Are Beautiful the Way You Are. We conceptualized it here within my curatorial company, Black Perfume. And, I had, like Jesse, for example, Jesse Siegel, who was in the MFA program, the print MFA program at PNCA, and now live in Amsterdam. He sort of kind of like edited and worked on all of the web aspect of it, the online aspect of it. And Doug, who works from Portland, also did the design of all the material. Alex, who is at PSU right now, is my curatorial assistant. So we did a lot of like working material around that. So basically, the team I had in Senegal, in Portland, had been with me for the last 4 years, 5 years since I left Portland, and we've been working together and collaborating. And not only that, we had to find a partner in Senegal to sort of do all of the legwork there, or get all the permits, get the walls, find the printer, do the promotional material for the press and all of that. So it's really humbling to kind of like know that you have an idea, a passion, and it only exists if you are able to share it with other people and make them your collaborators and have them help you make it come into reality, into place. So yeah, I'm heavily, leaning into collaboration. Even in my painting, it's a collaboration between painting and photography, by the way. I've been looking for that word, but actually it's not a conflict, it's a collaboration between two mediums who have different history within my own history, so.
Would you consider collage part of your practice?
Yeah. Collage is a very harsh word. It's kind of mean, like like when you say collage, all of a sudden like the value kind of like drop, like collage is like for kids, you take glue and then bam, bam, bam. But yeah, like there is the whole composition, the organization of the space, and the surface, and the way I compose, even though, I wouldn't say, I would say a mixed media work than collage, but yes, like it involved like gluing stuff on other stuff and putting it together the way, and it's kind of like a metaphor for me, of like all of this dislocated, part of my life, like just like having been born in Africa and now living in America and having done all of these stops. It's kind of like you're just picking up the pieces and putting them back together, basically, so.
In the print that I'm currently working on through Watershed.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate, I'm loving it even before seeing it.
I was going to ask how the digital aspects of it, how you feel about that related to your physicality of painting directly onto canvas.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question because, print is one of the things, you want to do, and you want to have the proximity of doing it in your studio and make it happen, but you will never do it. Somebody else going to do it for you, you know? And, you know, so it's like one of those things that is so close to you, but so distant at the same time, you know? And then how do you make that how do you make that more loyal to your practice, you know? And I've been, you know, this is my second or third print, you know, and it's the palace of the governor, of the French governor when Senegal was a colony. So basically, France ran West Africa and its colony from that building on that print. And you know, and I grew up looking at that big building as like a sacred place, you know, as like this foreign power that is so big that, you know, I can't even open my eyes and stare at it, you know. So, and you know, getting to a place for me which I can actually make an image of it is a lot of work, you know, psychologically. So, and I wanted to really make it very simple, you know, almost like memory of a child. I mean, like my childhood memory, you know, kind of like that. And, but still give it its sort of, you know, terrifying presence, you know, because it's such a terrifying presence, you know, like how do you make it such an innocent image, such a playful image, but still kept the sort of like terrifying shadow that is in it, you know, and, you know, and, you know, I think we are doing okay with it, you know. What do you think?
I think it looks great.
Cool. Well done then.
A technical question regarding the buildings, what types of paint was used? Is there a traditional material that is/has been used?
Yeah, that's also a good question because, you know, speaking of painting as a performance for me, sort of kind of bring me back to like when I fell in love with walls, because, you know, like I would take long walks when I was a teenager, you know, because I felt alone within my own sort of misery of being, you know, Senegalese and, you know, going to a French school, you know, and all of those kind of like, how do you call it? Assimilation that come with it, or alienations, you know. So I would take long walks, solitary walks, and what I would just enjoy is just like looking at the walls of the city. So when there was a protest or a campaign for a political candidate or whatever, you would sort of kind of follow the thread just by reading everything that's on the walls. And you can see also in the show I did in Dakar, how the walls there are very populated with things, you know. So going from there, you know, and then adding to my practice then, just like doing little tags and graffiti on the walls. So it was always quick, it was always performative. And now in my studio, I found that the brush, the paintbrush and certain material are not rendering that, you know. So what I'm using right now is very large, big acrylic markers. You know, they are markers like for graffiti, but you pour acrylic in it. So they are very effective in the way of the fact that they dry fast, and also they are still giving me the quality of the paint I need. And I mix that with a little bit of ink here and there, you know, to just give it some kind of like reflection or shining. And also a little bit of oil stick, you know, to make the line, to kind of like create the composition and play within the sort of, you know, texture of the surface.
You have made work and created work in Portland in the past. Can you talk about showing this body of work in Portland and Portland as a context for it?
Yeah, you know, like it was really, you know, Elizabeth Leach is a good friend before anything. You know, she's been a friend and a support, you know, when I was in Portland, you know, and you know, she kind of like, you know, captured, you know, she captured that sort of presence of the Portland art scene, you know, and I feel very grateful and lucky to work with somebody like her. And we bump into, you know, each other in some art fairs, Miami and Chicago and other places, and we always kind of promised each other to do something together. And when I started making this body of work, it was just natural for me to show it first in Portland, as a beginning, because basically, Portland was like the end of, a journey for me, but also it informed very much about this journey I'm taking on now. So it's just like, synchronicity, things coming together nicely. And also it's a very neutral territory, speaking of like during the Black Lives Matter protests, like I was on the phone with a friend in New York, and he was like, huh, man, like Portland, huh? Who knew Portland will become the center of the protest, because Portland is also so white, kind of like just taking on like this, riot and protest every night. And it become like, just like this kind of place, all of a sudden that kind of matter on the map, for us Black people and, and also artists, so all comes together.
You mentioned that you curate as an artist, not as a curator. I too approach curating similarly. Would you talk about how this evolved in your practice? When did you start thinking / doing curatorial projects, and how do you see this work next to your art making?
Yeah, like actually, when I was in grad school in San Francisco, the dean of my school and vice president of my school was Okwi Enwezor, who is a renowned Black curator. His last work was the Venice Biennale, major work, but also he went on to taking, the Haus der Kunst in Munich and did several exhibitions that were like fantastic there. Like, for example, Oscar Murillo's show was great. The 20th century African painters was great. So Louis Bourgeois show was great. So, that guy gave me, we become friends when I was a student. He kind of mentored me, and he become like an inspiration because, always in his curation, he always sort of kept in mind, not the institution kind of like need or sort of kind of like concerns, but rather like, oh, what is the voice I'm missing that I can give light to, So when I moved to Portland and started, teaching at PNCA, I opened this space, with my friend Tim Donha. And at first it was like a very nice playground to create a community and do things for the sake of doing it, because we just needed to sort of kind of energize, our lifestyle, But then I realized, hey, this is a great opportunity to sort of kind of like, give light, to those who don't have light, and and give voice to those who don't have voice. So I started then thinking about curation as not as an institutional sort of approach, but more of like, how do I make this happen, and how can I make it happen, and which would make sense, and then give light to something that's missing, what it takes is to have a context. You always need to think about a context, why you're doing it and where you're doing it and how you're doing it, and then you have to conceptualize around the artists you want to work with. Why do you want to work with those artists, and what is it they are bringing to the conversation? And then you create a narrative, you create a line of speech in which, the viewer can come in and understand what you're talking about and what you're doing. Like most often, like the institutional curators are really concerned about their boards and the museum agenda or the institution agenda, and within capitalism, so let's say capitalism, and so my curation is not dictated by capitalism, it's dictated by what's missing in the conversation, and how can I get close to that and add it to the conversation.
Someone was wondering what the large pieces were made of that you pasted up in the street. It looks like plastic material, and they like to put up their work in the street. How do you like the way it makes you feel when you put it in the street?
Yes, like that was a big conversation because, all of these artists have worked in museums, so they are pretty comfortable artists, and within the parameter of the COVID, and being in Africa, we couldn't kind of like ship the original work because it would have taken a lot of money and logistic, and also, you know, all the museums and art institutions are closed because of COVID. So we wanted to take over the street. So what came to me was a project I did with For Freedom a few years back, 2-3 years back, which was billboards, artists putting work up on billboards all over the United States. And then I was like, okay, maybe I can use the same system. But that system, which can be applied to America, where, you know, you can you can do that in America, transgress, bring artwork on a billboard, and people can still see it as artwork. But in Africa, whatever is foreign that's coming from other lands and art on billboard is advertising, you know. So that's why we took it down and put it on the walls, on the street walls, you know. But the whole concept and fabrication and production around it is exactly the same as billboard making, you know. We send a big file to the printer in Senegal, and they made the print, and we use the same kind of like technique of glue, you know, to put it on the wall, you know. But this makes it more like street art, it makes it more like Banksy, it makes it more like, you know, the guy's gear in France, you know, so than anything else, you know. So you know, it was a nice approach, and what was wonderful about it also was that all of these artists actually make work about the people in the street, Black people in the street. And then the work is on the street, looking at all the Black people who never seen it before, who are in Africa, and who all of them can reflect and say, oh, wow, this is how they see us over there, you know, across the pond, you know what I mean? So, which was a really nice, terrific experience.
Can you talk a little bit more about your process of connecting with these artists and networking and kind of getting the group together to put these images up on the walls?
Well, that's where art school come in play, you know, because most of these artists, you know, like I would say every show I've done for the last 3-4 years, I always had a good friend from art school in the show, you know, and of course, having those friends, you know, you get to hang out with them, you get to socialize with them, you get to work with them within their own galleries. And so it becomes just like a network of like, you know, artists who work together or know each other from art school, and you just, you know, make your way around and see who you want to have in your show. But at this point, since I have a company, you know, it makes it easier, a curatorial company. So, you know, we have a lot of material that can prove, you know, our professionalism and, you know, and our dedication to the cause of exhibiting work. So it become a very nice conversation with, you know, galleries or institutions in terms of borrowing work or sharing work or getting in touch with an artist and doing a show.
Is there a difference between the art scene / environment in the US versus Senegal? And if so, do these environments change the identity, your identity as an artist?
Yeah, you know, it's a very interesting question, you know, because I was in Senegal up to 2 weeks ago. You know, I just came back this last weekend, and bringing work there, and most of the people in the team I work with were just like graduating from art school there. So I would say the difference is more in the economy of it. You know what I mean? You know, you can be an artist there in Senegal your whole life and make little and still be an artist. You can make 1,000 paintings in Senegal, you know, with like $1,000 a month. You know what I mean? Living on $1,000 a month, you know. So there is no pressure from society like in America, you know, to have you get a job because you had an expensive education, you know, to have you, you know, be assistant of somebody because, you know, you got to pay your bills and life is expensive here. Life is very cheap there. And most of the artists are perceived as like oracles, people who are kind of like into another zone and they can do great things. So people kind of like leave them alone and kind of help them out, so there is that, and then maybe the approach to material is different because it's not as developed or industrialized as here, so the concept of art supply doesn't exist in Africa. You create your own supply, you know what I mean? So here you go to Blick, you buy your stuff, and then, it's all art supply. So even in my work, I try to break that, that idea of the art supply, sort of kind of bring domesticity to it. That's where it's coming from, having lived in Senegal and studied my practice there. You always have to find the material that speaks the most to you and create a new meaning with it.
Someone wants to ask about Black is Beautiful regarding its size and how you personally interact with it, viewing/experiencing. When you stand in front of it or walk alongside it, do you feel like you're inhabiting or entering this imaginary outside? Is it possible for others to enter this space, or is it always outside?
The painting?
The works that are pasted on the walls.
Oh, you are beautiful the way you are?
Yeah.
Yes. And what is the question?
They're asking about their embodiment in interacting with your works in person at a physical site.
Yeah, like, I don't know how to answer that, but, like the goal was to, to really bring these images that are very strong of Black people within the context of a Black city in Africa, and sort of kind of like let that conversation go on, it's a very silent conversation, but also very powerful. Oh, I just saw that she's talking about the painting, she said. Yeah, the painting titled Black is Beautiful. Yeah, which is the green one, right? With the red and white tile. Yes, okay, yes, the 4x8. So yeah, so that painting, actually, that painting is sold, and a friend of mine bought it, it's, sorry, like, this portfolio is not very too loyal to the exhibition, we had to switch one or two, but that painting is sold, and the artist Amoko Boafo bought it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Amoko Boafo, but he's an African painter from Ghana who studied in Austria, and 2 years ago, his work was around 5,000 a piece, and now he just sold, at Christie a few months back, a piece for $900,000. So he just had a show in Chicago, and he came to visit me in my studio, and he walked in, and he said, "This is going with me. That's mine." So it was very much of a compliment for me to have, a friend artist who's so successful, see a work and within 2-3 minutes decided this is the work he wants, so it kind of spoke directly to him that way, and I think, yes, there is some dryness to it, and there is some dust to it, and some reflection to it that is very much of a form of a nostalgia going on. It's like it's an abandoned site, but still active and functional within the context of the image.
Sharita says, all right, let's ask some Black questions, some diasporic questions. Can you talk about the threads you see running through the work you create as an artist, looking at African/Black artists capturing Black life, post-coloniality through Black artists in Senegal, the US, Dominican Republic, etc. What are we capturing? What are we saying to each other? Who is the we you see yourself a part of?
Wow, what a question. You can write a book. You can write a book with that.
I'll put it in the chat.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Sharita. But yeah, no, it's a very, very wonderful question, because it's, to me, it's simple, we have Africa and its diaspora, and it has a lot of pain, a lot of pain and a lot of suffering, and, and a lot of, nostalgia and, and missing each other, and crying and fighting, so, but the same way it was done through music, in Bristol or London in the 60s and 70s between the Caribbeans, and the Africans there meeting. The same way, the first Black Congress was actually like of artists and writers in 1957 was initiated by a Senegalese man from my own hometown, Alioune Diop in Paris. You had Richard Wright there, you had James Baldwin talking with Césaire and Senghor and other African leaders and writers and artists. So that sort of convo, that sort of convocation of Black voices, is happening today, and that's why I call it's a new negritude, because the negritude was that philosophy that reunited kind of like all of the Black under the same umbrella after the Second World War. And I'm talking about now a new contemporary negritude, because simultaneously all of these Black poets are popping out in Africa, in the Caribbean, you have Black people from Colombia, you have Black people from the Dominican Republic, from Brazil, from France, from London, from America, so nobody owns Blackness. We all share it, and we all speak of it in our ways, but we all speak of it, and thinking about it and thinking of it, they all come into the same place, and some use their body, some use, painting, some use photography, some use the environment, but it's always about the need of speaking and giving to this voice justice, how do we give ourselves justice, so, and also art is a place of beauty. Let's not forget that, so, like we make beauty and, and beauty is a very smart thing to do. Making beauty is a very smart thing, so it takes a lot of, like brain, and I think coming from all of those angles, the future can only be bright, so, I'm just like very grateful to be, to be living at a time in which I'm allowed to speak of my Blackness, because we got to think about everybody else who came before and couldn't, or were muted, and, so it's time for us to kind of like, get together, I think, and start having a conversation, because it's about conversing. It's not about arguing. It's about sharing experiences. It doesn't matter how deep the wound is, a wound is a wound.
How is now living in Chicago affecting your art practice and your love for collaboration in the midst of a pandemic?
Well, yes, Chicago, I chose to live in Chicago because it was the Midwest. I never been to Chicago. I only been twice to Chicago before moving here. And each time it was a week. So I moved to Chicago with a two weeks experience of Chicago. But it's the city of Theater Gate. It's the city of Obama. It's the city of opera. It's the city of Michael Jordan. It's the city of Kerry James Marshall. And you can keep naming them, all of these Black voices, this Black power, these very powerful, very intellectual, Black people, and they come from many, many places. And let's not forget, it's also the city of Black migration from the South, So within that, it's just like, to me, it's just like, oh my God, I'm just overwhelmed by all of these Black experiences I'm having, not to sort of kind of like put it in confrontation with mine, but how do I sort of add my voice to this cacophony of other voices which are needed now, to kind of like, uplift, our people and our culture. So, to that perspective, to that end, it's just like wonderful to be here. I just had last night here a dinner with my friends, watching watching the elections, and I had somebody from the Obama Foundation, I had somebody from the Art Institute, so it's just cool to be in a place also where you can have access to those people and share language and ideas, on a daily basis.
Is there any advice you would give to the BIPOC community here at PNCA, specifically the students?
Yes. Yeah. Nobody ever asked me that question. And I was there for 10 years. So anyway, yeah, what I would say is just, keep working, man. What's important is to make the work. It's not to talk about it. It's not to think about it. It's to leave traces. You can only leave your marks on the paper. You can't leave it on the walls. You can't leave it in the archive. You have to make work. Make it. And then, when you made enough, you'll see yourself. You'll see who you are. Because at the end of the day, we all have our own sort of handicaps, and strength and power and vision. But only by practice you can find it and see it. You have to just like put it on paper and look at it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How do you see your work alongside the practice of graffiti? Do you see your message as being told better when you create your own version of these buildings before painting over them? Do you have any background with graffiti?
Yeah, like when I was in art school in Senegal, my first job, I was hired by a company that would, put wheat paste all of this art all over for like music concert or whatever that was happening. I was the guy with the bucket, and the glue, wheat pasting stuff on the walls on the street. And then I would get frustrated and I would start writing things on it, and do stuff like that later on, kind of like destroying it, basically destroying what I put it there like a few years back. So, and that's my history with graffiti. And then I study a lot of the idea of the walls, like the way the walls talk to their people, the way the Berlin Wall, I was obsessed with the Berlin Wall, how it spoke to the Western culture, and how it kind of like created space for healing, and all of that. So also, looking also at Soweto, in South Africa during the apartheid, and how, those places, all of the voices were on the walls, So I kind of like, become this guy who wanted to, to have my voice on the walls, So now it kind of like took its journey into like contemporary art and, the art that is inside, not outside, So, but still, it's speaking of the inside out, and it's sort of like replacing the facade within the interior of the domestic, and sort of creating that sort of conversation between the inside and the outside again, So how do we make visible our own inside, meaning like our living, our contextual living inside, because also one thing that we don't know about Black people most of the time, or Africans, wherever you are, the lifestyle that is projected into the world is white, so we always forget, okay, this is a white lifestyle, it's not Black, so like how do we do that, and that's why one of the painting is called "My Blackness Should Not Offend You," meaning like, why should I take your white lifestyle, and when I show you my Black lifestyle, it becomes something that maybe is not okay, so my blackness should not offend you. And that painting is kind of like also speaking of the history of painting through Jasper Johns and his gesture and his use of green and blue and black, so kind of like taking from Jasper Johns and saying, but it's me and it shouldn't offend you. So
The language of using the open air versus street art is interesting, and would love to hear more about the language choice.
yeah, because it's not street art. Those artworks are in museums, and so let's just think, like one of the conversations we had, creating this show was, okay, during the pandemic, all of the art institutions are closed. So how do we collapse the museum walls and the gallery walls and let the art be outside without creating a disruption in the reading of it, without destroying the vision and the voice of the artist, and so these are like very, very, very sort of valuable artworks that we chose to make a reproduction of and put it on the street as if they were in a museum.
Are you in the process of thinking about, or have you begun a new project since your most recent exhibition in Portland? And have the US riots, Portland, and other cities influenced your creative decisions for your current or next proposed project? Thank you, Modou.
Yes, thank you. So, is it a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, well, you have to realize that, my life, as is, doesn't need a protest to be activated. You know what I mean? I've been processing my whole life in silence. So my work is a statement of that. And so like I said, I'm grateful to just be able to make work at a time in which I can do it without being muted, without being pushed back. And of course, the news, and the events always kind of put, some kind of energy to it, but what's there is there, like I know my own misery, and I know my own pain. I don't need somebody to tell me or protest for me. I know it. And that's what I do. I sort of play on it. I laugh about it. I use it. I make it more beautiful, or I yell sometimes, or I cry. Because that's what needed on the canvas. So.
That was the end of the question list, but kind of going off of you talking about your emotions and creating, I always see you on your lives, you're always joyous and dancing. Are there moments where you're also just crying and painting at the same time?
No. I might cry after. But no, like the act of painting is just such a beautiful act, and it's just the act of making in general. And that's where we win as artists. We don't win with the money, and we don't win with the social status, we win with that joy, that energy we get, from making, so when I'm in the studio, it's just, I'm in heaven. I see you, Matthew. How's it going?
Good.
Nice, nice. So maybe one more question or something? Are we good?
I think we've come to the end. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Modou. Do you want to let us know, your show's coming up at Elizabeth Leach soon, right?
Yes.
I was going to say the dates. Do you have those?
Yes, it's I think the 24th of November to December 30.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I was just going to say to the audience, we are finishing up the print for you, so hopefully we will have that in the exhibition as well. And
Yeah.
for those that are on campus, let me know if you want a sneak peek as we're kind of finalizing that.
Yes. I'm going to talk to Daniel and we'll talk. So. Yeah. So, but thank you so much. This was great. Thank you, Matthew. I really appreciate the work you're doing.
Yes, and I'm hoping we can continue collaborating in the future. So there's a lot of things I want to keep doing with you. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you, Modou. Thank you, Edson. And we'll see you soon.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Bye-bye.